Toy-polloi, a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a toy restorer who does not exist. Toy-polloi, a young loner on a crusade to champion the cause of the broken, the helpless, the powerless, in a world of collectors who operate above the law.
Welcome to Toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we're going to be looking at touching up the paint on a vintage Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back Boba Fett, because this is a figure I am constantly asked about how to touch the paint up on, and one that I probably should have covered years back when I first started toy-polloi. But I now have a couple here that are ready for a bit of restoration. But first up, I want to say a massive thank you to Brad and Jenny, better known as the Plastic Jabber on Instagram, because they very kindly sent me in this Boba Fett, who needs quite a lot of paintwork. And also a big thank you to Chris Dawson, who I did a trade with recently, and I traded him some Transformers weapons for this Boba Fett on the right. And this all happened because I actually bought a figure off eBay, which I showed in one of my sort of toy hunting videos. It turned up and it was in too good condition. This was the Boba Fett I bought. You can see here, actually when it arrived, the paint was pretty reasonable, and I thought there's no point in me showing a restoration of this figure because there's hardly anything wrong with him. So these are the ones that I've got now, because as you can see, that's a lot more sort of beaten up and a lot more of a beater Boba Fett, and I think that's the one that we're going to do the work on today, because yeah, most of the paint is missing on the front of it. Now Boba Fett is actually a pretty awkward figure to sort of touch the paint up on, because every figure has slightly different colours to it. They're all sort of subtly different. So I'm just going to pick this one, and this is the one I'm going to work on. So when you come to do your sort of painting on it, you will need to modify the colours slightly, because they are subtly different. The greens on the front, especially on his armour, do sort of vary from more of a khaki green to sometimes more of an olive green. So just have to sort of bear in mind that when you come to restore the paint on yours. But let's get to work on this Boba Fett. The first thing I do whenever I get a figure in to restore is actually give it a good clean. So the one that I was sent by Brad and Jenny, which was this guy, I gave a very good wash in some hot soapy water just to remove all the sort of dirt and grime, because these figures have obviously been played with a lot. You can tell that by the amount of paint that's missing on them, and there's a lot of sort of in-ground dirt in all the sort of little folds and details in the plastic. So a good clean in hot soapy water, and he ended up looking pretty reasonable. He also had a couple of ink stains on his leg, so I've removed those as well. That's done using some benzoyl peroxide, which you get in certain types of spot cream. It takes quite a few applications at this time of the year in the UK, because you really need the sunlight to make the benzoyl peroxide work and sort of bleach out the ink. But I did it in the winter. It took me about 10 goes. So each day I'd put on a little bit of benzoyl peroxide, let it sort of dry out. Next day I'd wash it off and put another bit on. And after about 10 days of that, you can see that the ink spot that was on his leg here is pretty much vanished. And yeah, it looks pretty good. But as I say, in the summer that works a lot quicker. Now, when it comes to painting Boba Fett, he's a figure that does have an awful lot of different colours on him, so I've had to sort of mix and match a lot of paints to get something that matches. You can see on the front he's got two shades of a sort of reddy brown on his face. The red is also used on his gauntlet here, and the brown is used on his belt and sort of pouches there. Then he has some yellow on bits of his armour, on his shoulders and on the other gauntlet and on his legs. He has green on his sort of chest armour, and then when we turn him over he has blue on the back of his jetpack there. So he just has an awful lot of colours to paint. Quite a lot of Star Wars figures only have like 1 or 2 colours, but this Boba Fett has 5, which means you will need all of these paints to do the job and get something that looks nice. And as I say, over the last sort of week I've been trying to work out good mixes of all these paints to get the colours I want. You can see here these are my sort of test sheets, so this is me mixing various colours and making notes of what colours work. So that's my first go. This is a sort of second pass with some extra bits after I'd ordered some new colours. I think now I have all the colours I need to make Boba Fett look good. So let's get painting. First up, we're going to deal with the 2 shades of red, so the sort of the red around the visor, and then the sort of more browny red that goes around his belt and everywhere else. And these are going to be using actually the same base colours. I've got 3 shades of Humble paint here. We have RC423, we have number 70 and number 33. I like Humble paints just because they're very easy to sort of work with. I haven't managed to get Humble paints for all of this project, but I was going to be sort of mixing and matching. But for this first stage, these are Humble paints, and these are all a matte finish, and I'm not too worried about the finish because when it comes to the end of this project, I'm actually going to put a sort of luster, sort of gloss coat over the top of all the paint so I can use matte for the base colour. Now, as you can see here, we'll start with a lighter red, and that main sort of base colour will be RC423, and we're going to mix in a little bit of the brown and a little bit of the black because the basic paint is just slightly too bright. So I've got here just a piece of paper, and I'm going to grab a little bit of the brown and we'll mix that in to the red just to sort of tone it down a little bit. There's no sort of exact way of doing this. I always say this when people ask me sort of is there an exact sort of method. The answer is no, you just have to do it by eye, and at some point you'll get a colour that looks the right sort of tone, and it just takes a little bit of practice to get it sort of looking right. So go slowly, mix a little bit together, and you'll find some colour that does match. I think that's already right. You can see it is a very subtle amount of mixing. I have a much smaller paintbrush over here, and I'm going to use that to apply it to the face because there's only sort of tiny areas that need painting. You can see here if we do this, this should match. Oh yeah, that's a pretty good match. I'm doing the lighter red first just because there's less of it, and then we can do the darker brown afterwards. Now for Boba Fett's belt, it is the same basic colours again, but we just need to mix in a little bit more sort of black to make it a bit darker, and a little bit less red because we want it to be sort of based around the browner shade, which is number 70. So if I take a little bit of black and mix it into this number 70, you can see it sort of starts to tint down quite nicely. Actually, you're going to have to mix quite a bit in. But by adding the black, it goes a little bit grey. So what you do is add a little bit of the red in, and that sort of gives it the purple tinge that you see on this belt. So it's just a sort of careful mixing of the two. You'll get, sometimes you go wrong, sometimes it sort of doesn't look quite right, and you sort of have to start again. But with a bit of practice, you can end up with a colour that does look pretty close. So I think that is not looking too bad at all. Just clean my brush down a bit, and we can paint a bit on his belt here and see what that looks like. Oh yeah, that's nice. You see, that's a close match there. So it's the same 3 source colours, but with a different mix, you'll get a different result, and we can get something that looks right. So we'll just paint some of these, all the bits where it's been rubbed away. Makes a massive difference already. And at the end we'll put a top coat on it, and it will all look gloss and match the original paint as close as I can get it. now that that red and brown have had time to dry, we can move on to the green. Now the green is proving a little bit sort of tricky to get a perfect match, so I'm just going to go for something that I'm sort of happy with. As I say, the greens across different Boba Fetts tend to vary. So what I've done is I checked to see what sort of colours I had in my sort of collection. I didn't actually have a right green, so I went onto the Humbrol website and picked a colour I thought was the closest green, and then went to my local model shop, but sadly they didn't actually have that green in stock. So again, another quick search online, and I found a sort of colour chart that tells you other companies that sell greens that match that Humbrol colour. So you just look up one colour and it will tell you the number of different companies' paints. So I bought some of these, which are Vallejo model colour paints, and this is number 967, which matches the green that I was sort of hoping to find for Humbrol. And this is a nice sort of olive green. It's a little bit too vibrant, as you can see here. It's just a bit too sort of bright. If I bring the figure next to it, you can see it's a little bit too bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this one as well. I've got a little bit of black here, again the same black that I used on the sort of reds and browns. So this is a Humbrol number 33, and I also have a yellow, because sometimes when you add black it goes a bit too grey, and the yellow should sort of just tone that down a bit. And again, that is a Vallejo colour. This is number 953. I'm actually going to be using this for doing some of the yellow paintwork later on, but I've got this to hand. So let's just mix these colours and we'll see if we can get a match for the green of Boba Fett's chest armour. All of this is a little bit of guesswork, as I say. Just sort of keep mixing and you'll sort of come to a colour that matches, always sort of a close enough match. Practice and patience is what you need when painting and matching things like this. It's never an exact art. And as you can see on my little colour charts at the back, these are the ones I've mixed previously that sort of I got happy or close to sort of the colours that I wanted. So I'm going to be recreating those mixes if I possibly can. So that's just black into the olive green. And that certainly has toned it down quite a bit. It's taken a lot of the edge off it. Let's see what that looks like. Actually, that's not bad. It's still a little bit too greeny green. I think a combination, a little bit more black and some yellow in that, and that might start to look the colour I'm after. So just take a little bit of yellow, mix that in, not too much because it will obviously lighten it. See what that looks like. That's not bad, you know. It's not a perfect match, but it's going to do the job, and that's all I'm worried about. I want it to look as close as I can, but if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter. You can still appreciate it. So let's get this paint on here and we'll get the chest armour painted. The green has now dried. You can see it's actually a little bit darker than the original green, but I quite like that because that looks sort of more like you'd see Boba Fett in the movie. Obviously I could have sort of redo this and lighten it up, but for the moment I'm sort of happy with that. You can see this one is a little bit lighter. The original paint is also put on incredibly thinly. It's not really painted, it's sort of printed on. So trying to recreate the sort of the thinness of this original coating is quite hard when you're using paints like this, but you can certainly make something that looks pretty decent. I already think that looks a lot better. Now we're going to move on to the yellow, and again this is incredibly thinly applied, so I'm going to try and do the same and sort of apply a thin coating, and you can see it's a sort of bit more orangey yellow. I did buy this yellow, again this is a Vallejo model colours because I couldn't get a Humbrol in the yellow I wanted, so this is 953, but I'm going to mix it with a little bit of Humbrol paint. Again this is another acrylic, this is RC420, so this is RC stands for rail colour. You can see it's actually more of a sort of rusty browny orange than the orange that it shows on the top of the label, but a little sort of mix of these two paints. I should be able to get something that matches, and if I apply it thin enough I think it will look alright. So let's just mix these colours together. Again, I have done some tests with this and I've got something that sort of I'm happy with. You can see this is my mixed version here. Actually it is just a little bit of orange and a little bit of yellow together, and you get a quite nice goldeny yellow colour. And if we apply that thinly, so I'm going to get not much on the brush there, I'm going to apply it thinly and we'll see what that looks like. Yeah, that's pretty good. When applying thinly you want to sort of go quite evenly with the strokes, otherwise you'll end up with really obvious bits that you've not painted or sort of painted over twice. That's not perfect, but that's not bad, and really that's all I want to go for at this stage. I think not bad will do me just to make this figure look nice and displayable, and I'm going to end up displaying it inside my custom Slave 1 that I've previously done on this channel. So let's get the rest of these sort of painted up, thin coats on all of it, and it should look quite nice. Final area to paint is the blue on Boba Fett's jetpack on the back. Now again, I couldn't find a Humbrol paint for this, so I've went online again and found a match to the colour that I wanted. And again, this is a model colour Vallejo. This is 962, and this is sort of quite a nice vibrant blue. But as you can see, it's a little bit too vibrant. If I just mix black with it, not 33 that I've used in the other mixing, it goes a bit grey. So I'm going to sort of counteract that by putting a little bit of purple in, and that should just sort of bring it back to this more vibrant but darker blue. And again, this is a Vallejo model colour. This is number 812. So I say they all vary in colour. I've got one here which is a lot sort of greyer. I've got another one which is a lot bluer. So you just have to base your colours on whatever figure you have and whatever figure you're working on. So again, let's just start mixing this and we'll try and match this blue colour. If it's not perfect, I'm going to repaint all of this blue anyway, so it doesn't matter, but I want to try and get as close as possible. So a little bit of black into the blue just to sort of tone it down again, and then a little bit of purple in just to sort of give it a bit more vibrancy, and it should end up looking pretty reasonable. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. That's close enough. Again, a thin coating because it's only ever been painted with a thin coating before. Yeah, it's still a little bit grey, but I'm happy with that. The final paint to apply to Boba Fett is a clear top coat, and for this again I'm going to be using some Humbrol acrylic. This is number 135, and this is a sort of semi-gloss clear coat that goes over the top of all the paint that I have applied. When it comes out of the pot it looks like it is white. You can see here this is the paint, but when you apply it and let it dry, it does dry clear. So we are just going to paint this over every area that I have painted, because as you can see this has got quite a matte finish at the moment, and this will give it a nice sort of little sheen to it. So apply it to a nice clean brush, and I'm just going to start painting. This will take a little while, and I might have to do it in 2 goes just because there's so much to paint and I don't want to sort of get it on my fingers too much. So just apply this nice and liberally, and you'll see quite a difference by the time this is all done. And here is the finished figure. As you can see, the addition of the top coat just gives it that extra little bit of shine, which makes it look more like an original Star Wars figure. It's very easy to do that, and I do it on quite a lot of figures. Sometimes I will mix gloss and matte paints together to get the same effect, but in this instance, because there were so many different colours to use, I didn't want to buy sort of gloss and matte versions of everything. I just thought I'd use the matte ones and add this top coat to it, and you can see that actually looks pretty nice. It really does make quite a big difference to Boba Fett to sort of touch up the paint on it. I'll compare it here with the other figure that I haven't restored that you saw at the start of the video, so you can see quite a difference in those two, especially around the face. The face looks a lot sharper. It's always the paint on the front of Boba Fett's mask that gets rubbed off, and also all of the armour on the front. So once you've painted that back on, he just looks like a much more sort of displayable figure. As I say, that's a little bit too dark, that green. I might repaint that at some point, but it's still pretty nice. It sort of matches more what we see in the movie, but overall just a little tad too dark, I would say. The other colours have actually matched very well. You can see putting a thin coat of the sort of yellowy orange on there makes it look like the original, and also getting these sort of reds to match does make quite a big difference. If we turn him around as well, you can see the blue on the back. Actually the blue, by the time I put the top coat on it, is a very close match as well. Just adding a tiny little bit of sort of purple to that gives it the same sort of tinge and colour that the original paint has. So there you go, that is how to repaint a vintage Boba Fett figure, something that people have asked me over and over and again for years to do, and just one figure that I've never got around to. As you can see, there's actually quite a lot of paints required to do this figure, just because he's got so many colours to him, but it can be done. So I hope this video has been of interest to you. If you've enjoyed it, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.